So hi everyone. My name is Rachel Chung. I'm a principal in the DLR Group DC office in Chinatown. And we're thrilled to present the Anacostia Recreation Center at this session. This project, with me, I have Edgar Moreno, the project manager of this project. We started this project, let's see, summer of 2021. So a little while ago, and a few months ago, we had the official groundbreaking where they started construction. We can go to the next slide. Oh, actually, let's have Edgar introduce himself.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Edgar Moreno with DLR Group. I'm a project manager with the Justice and Civic Group here in the DC office. Been working with Rachel for many years on multiple DC projects, and as always, it's always a pleasure and an honor to be able to work on these types of community facilities that align with the mission of the committee that you're all a part of. And we're really excited to, after having been through the design process, there was COVID interruptions, and of course you have to navigate through the construction escalation issues. But I'm happy to say, as Rachel noted, we recently broke ground on the project and looking to finish next October. So community's excited, we're excited, DGS and DPR, everyone's really happy to see this move forward, and look forward to seeing the positive contribution this facility will have in the community.
Okay, just some high-level information. So our client for this and collaborator was the District of Columbia, the General Service Administration, and the Department of Parks and Recs. The building is new construction. It's a little over 12,000 square feet and a little over 1 acre of for the site with a lot of play fields and playground structures. This property is in the Anacostia Historic District, Ward 8, and Edward would talk about kind of the regulatory agencies we have to go through. All of the public buildings in the district, regardless of where it's located, has to get reviewed by the Commission of Fine Arts. So this one went through that as one of the many regulatory agencies. The GMP budget, this was GMP, so this is CMR. It's around $12 million, and the contractor is Chiaramonti. And so on the left-hand side, I won't go through it, but those are our partners, the design partners and clients to the left. We've had geotech, hazmat, as well as archaeology surveys done for the site. So that's kind of high level about the project stats. I'll pass it over to Edgar to start talking about the design and process of the project.
All right, thank you, Rachel. So to orient everyone, if you're familiar with the Anacostia neighborhood and district just south of the Anacostia River in Ward 8. So our site is situated adjacent to Ketcham Elementary School. So this was a school that was initially built in 1908, and then over the course of the following decades expanded. Here you can see the 2 wings, and then ultimately in the 60s, there was a large addition, which makes up this block here. So to the north, we have the school, bounded on the south and on the east side by residential units, low-scale apartment buildings, single-family houses. And then just to the north, we have Good Hope Road, which is a major commercial corridor, currently under redevelopment, I believe. So quite a hodgepodge of uses surrounding the site. So our site is this highlighted green area, which is just south of Ketcham Elementary. and which they have actually been utilizing for their outdoor PE activities, also using some of the area as overflow parking. So ensuring that the Ketcham School had some access and use of the site was an early consideration, which I'll touch on with the project development piece. One thing I wanted to highlight here is that when the Ketcham Elementary School was expanded in the 60s, they cut U Street from in the east-west orientation. You can see where U Street kind of stops and then continues on the other side. And I point this out because it's a feature that we revisited in the site planning stage. As Rachel mentioned, we are within the Anacostia Historic District. This dark line represents the boundary. So you can see that we're just right in the historic boundary, made us subject to Historic Preservation Review Board approvals. Interestingly, Ketcham is outside the boundary, but is obviously an influence in the development of the site for the new recreation center. You can see the site is a little bit oddly shaped. Typically, when we're looking at rec facilities or park facilities, the ideal layout would be something a little bit more open. So in this case, we have somewhat linear site with some unique geometry to work around with the program. But yes, this is a historically designated zone, which factored into the development of the design. Here's an aerial, so you can see the Ketcham School, you can see the green space adjacent to it, you can see sort of the context in the neighborhood, the residential, there's a church, there's a historic old market back here, the commercial corridor on Good Hope Road, and you can see with this dash white line representing the U Street continuation from 15th back to the 14th Street side. Once this thing loads, you'll see the topo. So, there's always a challenge on every project. So in addition to the unique geometry, there was also some topography to work around. There's about a 10-foot elevation change from the northwest corner down to the southeast. So where you site the building, making sure that it's accessible from the approaches, from the public way, something that we had to work through with our civil engineer and with the grading. Here's some of the neighborhood context. As I alluded to earlier, mostly residential. You can see kind of the scale and the nature of the buildings on 15th Street, which will serve as the primary access point and the front of the facility. It also serves as a frontage for Ketcham Elementary. Here you can see sort of other uses like the St. Philip Church, which is to the west. You can see the kind of low scale apartment building type buildings, but also some of the historic row houses that occur in 15th Street and are contributing structures to the Anacostia historic fabric. Here's a streetscape of 15th Street, just to get a better handle of where the building is lying in terms of context, architectural context. Ketcham on the north of the site. Here you can see the open green area. Right now it's just fenced in. As you're walking down 15th, you just see the big open space. And then you transition over to some of the low-rise apartment buildings. Of note is sort of the various approaches to exterior materials. We have brick, we have wood siding for some of the older buildings, but also the range of colors, from light blue to sort of the traditional brick to the yellow, and then of course Ketcham, which has that kind of yellowish color to it. Here's some of the images of the school. As I mentioned, the original building was built around 1908. So fairly prominent, fairly civic presence. And then you can see the addition in the 60s, which is right off the open field play area. And then you can see sort of the access to the school from 15th Street. Here's some images of the site itself. open green area. There's backstop for softball. You can kind of get a sense of the topography. There's some drops, particularly around the edges, but for the most part, it's a gradual slope and relatively flat, flat enough at least for PE activities. Because this is a historic district, we had to take note and be mindful of the historical typologies around the neighborhood. I think primarily the row houses were the main contributing structures that we encountered within the historic boundary. Not much civic precedence, but we did have Ketcham, although it's technically not in the historic zone. We also have DC Prep, which is a block or so south of the Anacostia Rec Center site. So these two served as sort of references and guideposts for the development of the building design. And then you also have some of the historic commercial frontage that occurs a few blocks away. So in terms of trying to find a fit within the fabric, these were sort of the considerations we had to make, kind of citing pre-existing civic precedents, but also maybe taking some cues from even the residential lower scale buildings. So since this is a community facility, I think a major component of the development of the design was ensuring that we got strong engagement and input from the community and other stakeholders. So there was early on quite an extensive programming and visioning series of activities that took place, starting with meeting with DGS and DPR to ensure that we're in alignment with their overarching goals and objectives. Because of where we are in Anacostia, the neighborhood was very, very, very keen on having us ensure that the facility be a safe space and that we account for kind of a heightened security. So that was something that was echoed across all the channels that we interacted with, starting with DGS and DPR, and then in our collaboration with Ketcham School and then some of the other community groups. So the sense of safety and security was considered a non-negotiable objective. Exploring opportunities for interaction with the school and the community. So there will be an arrangement with the school for them to be able to use the facility during school hours. Specifically, they don't have a gymnasium, so now this new rec center will provide that space for them. And also just explore the resilient design. So we had a resilient design charrette early on to see what we can do to enhance the resiliency of the facility. We are working with DGS to obtain a grant to address certain features that would make the facility available for emergency situations in the event we need full capacity power backup, cooling centers for high heat days, or any other natural disaster or other situation that occurs where the neighborhood can use the rec center as a safe space. We went through our imagery walks with the community. Of course, back then, during this time, it was all virtual, so we didn't have the benefit of meeting folks in person, but we did, we made do as best we could, showed them some images to get a sense of what the community liked and did not like, for that matter, to inform development of the design. Looking at specific types of spaces, gathering spaces, educational, outdoor classroom and outdoor meeting areas, and then just spaces for quiet and respite. At DLR, we've established and developed a values workshop which addresses sustainability to ensure that the community's thoughts on how they want the facility to function within their community, how that gets addressed, whether it's energy use, whether it's well-being, whether it's drawing from nature. So we share these topic cards, and then at the end of the meeting come away with some goals and objectives. So out of this exercise, community activation, play, beauty and inspiration, community resiliency, equity and air quality came at the forefront of the priorities that as part of the design we should emphasize and explore. We engaged the community with some online surveys, so got quite a bit of good feedback. Coming to the top was the need for, or the desire for, fitness and gymnasium space. So the gymnasium was also, and the fitness room were part of the original program that DPR put together. So fortunately, that aligned with community needs. A play field and a track, since we are developing on an open site, the community wanted to make sure that there was still access to that. And then as far as, and then safety and security at the bottom right, you can see arose as another number one concern. So some of the input we got from the community, they want this to be a beacon of hope for this, for a neighborhood that has long struggled with security and safety, ways of engaging their youth, but also kind of crossing the multi-generational multi-generational community, and make sure that everyone is engaged and has an opportunity to benefit from the facility. So with that, here's our program. Rachel mentioned the scale. It's not a large facility. It's only 12,000 square feet, of which a good chunk of it is the gymnasium. So how we make this flexible for various uses was something that we needed to work through. So the original program, we have the staff office. We have 2 multi-purpose rooms that can be joined as one or separated via operable partition, a tech lounge for youth activities, a demonstration kitchen. That was something that in the surveys the community was interested in seeing, where they can do classes and kitchen demos. The fitness and gym, as I mentioned. Out on the site, the multi-purpose field, so that the school can maintain use of it, but also for community use, a walking and running track, an outdoor area for the classroom. So Ketcham Elementary School actually had an outdoor classroom. So as part of this scope and sort of as an outreach to the school, we included a refresh of that outdoor classroom and their community garden. And then the playground. So we have the playground area that's going to accommodate the younger kids and then the older kids. Other program elements that were at one point considered but ultimately de-scoped, either due to budget or space, was the basketball court, because there's one existing and we have the gymnasium now. Splash pad and parking that the school was hoping they could use, but alas, no space.
One thing to add about our community engagement process, like Edgar was saying, it was sort of in the middle and towards the end of the pandemic. And so most of that was done virtually. But we found that you can get pretty large participation in a virtual community meeting or engagement, because you have some people that don't typically raise their hand and speak in a public environment, but they are much more comfortable adding or contributing to the discussion virtually. And so they can raise their hand, they can put in the chat, they can provide those dots virtually. So that in being virtual, actually, we received a lot more feedback from the community.
Right, and just as a comparison, our last community meeting was held at the Anacostia Library, and it was in person, and only a handful of folks showed up. It was a very productive and lively meeting and discussion, but just kind of gives you the sense of how accommodating a virtual meeting can be for a lot of folks in the community. All right, moving on to site planning. As I alluded to earlier, one of the things that we wanted to explore was this reconnection of U Street, because they have this long site and opportunities to access it from 15th Street, but also the U Street intersection towards the west. Is how do we reconnect and how do we make use of circulation across the site, connections with the school and public access. So the primary theme here is the U Street Promenade. So where U Street was cut off, now we're reestablishing that connection, albeit at the pedestrian scale, where as you go down the promenade, you have the school access on the up north side, and then the field, the playgrounds. Early on, we had discussions with the principal to get an understanding of how they utilize the green space during PE. So that sort of drove where the field was going to be, because they are next to the playground on their side. So this zone kind of carved out for the school to a certain degree for their access and PE activities. And then you have the playground area, and then the siting of the building on 15th Street. So it achieves a few things. One, it establishes that community presence along a street where pedestrians and vehicles maneuver throughout the day, also kind of adjacent to the Ketcham School. So with that, we established a entry plaza on that connection. So that's the primary entrance. And then there is access from the west side through a gate. So you'd be able to access it from either side. In terms of the programming, this is the arrangement we landed on. So for the building itself, since we're fronting 15th Street, all the activated spaces are along that end of the building. Public access coming from the corridor, from the promenade. There's a secondary school access to accommodate and help provide dedicated access to school, since they'll be accessing mostly the gym in most cases. And then service access, we had an alley to the south that was able to accommodate the parking spaces for the facility, trash access and handling, but also the utilities. So all the Pepco and the gas lines are coming in from the south side. And then on the outside, you have the school and sort of the interconnection between the playground and the fields. Here's the site plan that we presented. So we can see the promenade here. You can see the locations of the refreshed community/school garden, the outdoor classroom. Here's the entry plaza. So this is the primary entry point. And then as you go down, there's a elevated platform, kind of like a patio area for fixed tables and seating. Then you got the playground, and then you have the field and exercise track, which goes around the field and then just kind of continues on that way. And then you can see the service, which made use of the public alley on the south side. All right, highlighting the entry plaza. So, it was important that we had a prominent place of entry to introduce the building and access to the promenade. So in our discussions with DGS and in trying to work out a program for the art and public places, we've created this entryway that features decorative metal panels that an artist will create an imagery for, and then kind of to accentuate and highlight the entryway as a deviation from just regular metal picket fencing. So something that's a bit more decorative, something a bit more welcoming and visually interesting to draw folks into the entry plaza. And then we propose these pivoting gates that would open and really open up the promenade, as opposed to single man gates that would seem a little bit more prohibitive. So again, you see this balance between really trying to address the security of the site, but at the same time maintain it as a welcoming destination. And speaking about security, so it was important that we highlighted to the community members, since they were concerned about security, how we were securing the site. So fencing all around the site, continuing the fencing that's there. Your access points are limited, so you have the entry plaza on 15th Street, and then the west entry off of the U Street intersection, and then the service access, which would be limited to staff. Moving on to the building design. As Rachel mentioned, this project kind of had the full slate of agency reviews subject to it. starting with the Commission of Fine Arts, being a DGS funded project, Historic Preservation Review Board, because we were in the Anacostia Historic District. And then the Office of Planning established this pilot program for the design excellence reviews. They had a committee of local architects that were brought in to critique and review the design and offer input. So that was a fruitful interaction with them. And then some of the neighborhood groups, like the Historic Anacostia Preservation Society, made up of community members, the ANC, going through the neighborhood commissions, and then just the broader community engagement activities. In addition to meetings with the school, the principal was pretty engaged early on and offered some great insight. Here's a floor plan. So you can see on the east side, as I mentioned, fronting 15th Street, you have the fitness. Well, you have the main entry. So you have the entry plaza that I shared earlier with the vestibule, providing access to the building reception area. Again, kind of reiterating this need for security. So visual supervision was something that we wanted to make sure we maintained. So if you're sitting at the desk, you can see right down the corridor and see who's accessing the individual spaces. You also have access to who's accessing the gym and the school kids coming in from the secondary entrance. So rounding out the program, the fitness, the kitchen, which also serves as a demo kitchen as it opens up to the adjacent multipurpose room. The two multipurpose rooms, which can be used as one space or two, depending on the function. And then the technology lounge that was included in the program. I will point out that there's been changes, new developments with this layout. In our more recent community meetings, there was a strong request for expanding the fitness component. So actually we are descoping one of the multipurpose rooms and enlarging the fitness room, basically doubling it to meet that need. And then the gymnasium, really just based on a typical elementary school size gymnasium, so that it's aligned with the use of the Ketcham. And all the service spaces off of the south side, which I mentioned is where the utilities are coming in. So as part of trying to meet our stormwater management requirements, we are relying on a vegetated roof to meet some of that. So you can see here vegetated roof on the lower portion, and then on the upper portion, meeting green code requirements by including solar panels, so partly renewable. And here's where we are with the exterior design. So this is the 15th Street view. You can see the main entry plaza here on this side with the canopy providing weather protection. If you remember some of the earlier images, specifically Ketcham and DC Prep, so you can see that in our meetings with CFA and Historic Preservation Review Board, the use of brick and the articulation of the 15th Street facade all were based on those pre-existing precedents, as well as the color, which we drew from the pre-existing streetscape. And then the scale with the 15th Street frontage, you have the kind of the offsetting and the scaling up as you work towards the gym. I mean, we did explore putting the gym on the 15th Street side, but obviously the scale was a bit much for that pedestrian zone. So there's a bit of a step up that occurs now with the way the building is laid out, massing wise. Here's a view towards the gym from the pedestrian side. You know, obviously the gym is inherently going to be a big blocky mass, so we explored ways to sort of minimize that bulkiness. So you can see we've introduced some glazing up on the upper portion. We felt it was also important to maintain a visual connection between the gym and the outdoor spaces. So fortunately, we were able to maintain the glazing that you see here. We did have more, but that was VE'd out. And then just looking at ways to further articulate the brick with this accent banding, and also some of this detailing, accenting, and kind of creating different planes on the elevations to add more visual interest. Here's a view looking north. You can see Ketcham beyond. And this is some of the imagery that we shared with CFA, kind of describing the intent of the material, the yellow brick, the gray brick, corrugated metal for the mechanical enclosure. And then sort of how the massing relates to the surrounding context with the Ketcham on the north side, but then so the more lower scale residential on the south side, which interestingly, because of the topography, ends up being kind of in alignment scale-wise. Here's an overhead view. And then just touching on some of the interiors. So we put together a couple of schemes, and the one that was selected was this one called Connection. So drawing from a palette that emphasizes community, commonality, but also drawing from nature. So in our color palette and material palette, as much as possible, we wanted to integrate the use of wood, as well as using colors like the blue color, which alludes to water, which can allude to sky, really just to have that calming effect within the spaces. Wow, that went by quick. So that's it for the presentation. So I guess now we can open it up to some Q&A. Rachel, I don't know if you see anything in the chat, or we can just take questions.
No, I think we can take questions, and maybe you want to, we don't need to share.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen, which is really a view of the school. I mean, of the recreation center. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask the design team at this moment?
I had a question about the siting and wondering if there was a concept that had attached the rec center to the elementary school. I mean, and maybe you can explain how the students get from the school to the gym on like a rainy day.
Right, sure. We can, maybe Edgar can talk about how they access the school, but it was very interesting because we looked at in the beginning site planning of the project, and there were really two ideas. One consistent idea of the pedestrian promenade that connects both the east and west, that continue that, or bringing back that pedestrian access that was closed off when the addition of Ketcham occurred in the 70s. We thought that was very strong and needed to happen. The siting of the building either was the front where it is, or in the back to connect those areas. But for security, everybody felt that where it's sited now was the appropriate one. And that was what was interesting, was that was all kind of we all felt strongly about the community, CFA, and that site planning development. That was what stuck from the very beginning to the end. You know, there were, it was really positive comments. So that development stayed. We didn't think of, because it is separate entities, the DCPS school as well as DPR, they're separate organizations. There are a few situations where they actually connect or are part of the building, but generally they prefer to have a different identity, but in co-location to use some of their facilities. So when we never looked at an option to extend the school with, or connect to the school with this new rec center.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of discussions about kind of both ways, what the two facilities could share. There were early discussions about, well, can we open up the playground to the community and utilize some of the space for other other needs. So I mentioned the splash park got de-scoped, basketball courts, that kind of thing. So to the level of how we wanted to interconnect the two sites, there was things that we were able to pursue, such as DPR was willing to share the gym, and we're willing to cover the refresh of the planners and the classroom. But the school, and understandably so, we're kind of hesitant to open up their facilities. And really, I'm guessing is driven mainly by the neighborhood and some of the concerns with safety and security.
And the primary way I think the students get to Ketcham is they walk and they cross 15th Street. So that's sort of the front entrance.
Thanks.
Anyone else like to ask a question or have any comments?
Sure, I will throw one out there. I was interested in what you talked about on the community engagement side, and you were forced into the online engagement just because of pandemic, but also that gave you an opportunity to connect with people. And I think I've had similar experience when I'm providing professional service or just as a neighborhood member. Like there isn't like one time necessarily that everybody can show up, and that's something I think that you probably have found out too, that Saturday morning is convenient for some people but not for others because of work and family situation, or during the day is out but evening. So I mean, how many of these community sessions did you have to have in different formats in order to feel like you had gotten a good representation?
I think that for DPR, they typically have at least 3 community meetings, and they generally tend to be in the evening. We offer, and again, it was all virtual for this project, but we did offer, if it makes more sense, for the weekends. But I think it's later, like 7:30. It could be 7:30 p.m. But we got a pretty good crowd. It could be 30, upwards of 30, 40 people. And they were actively engaged in the chat. And we were presenting or talking, and then you could see all the chat scrolling. So it worked out, but we have offered to have it at different times for their convenience. But it looks like historically, from their experience, DPR's experience with the different engagements with the community, evenings worked out well.
Right.
Well, unless anybody has any other questions, I'd like to thank you, Rachel and Edgar, for a terrific presentation. I really enjoyed how you were very specific at the beginning, showing who the stakeholders were and really sharing your floor plans with us. Very, very good project. I'm sure the Anacostia community is going to be really happy, and it's going to get a lot of views. Interesting how they wanted a bigger gym. I think very interesting. Well, thank you again.